Anyway, I'd like to call back to order this regular board meeting of the Urbana Park District Board of Commissioners. And the first item to deal with then is to either accept or amend our agenda for the evening. I'm not aware of any desired alterations. Is anyone else?
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. And that brings us to public comment. And I believe we do have somebody who has put forward and Dixie Jackson here to make a comment about Meadowbrook Gardening Program. Great.
Is this a good spot?
Yes.
Yep, please.
Please.
Looks like you have snakes under the table. Well, I'm pleased to be able to talk with you tonight. I'm Dixie Jackson. I live on Sherwin Drive in Yankee Ridge. My husband and I have gardened at Meadowbrook Park since the gardening program began. That's more than 40 years. And we're concerned about what we see as problems and a decline in that gardening program, problems that we face and problems that other gardeners face. When we began gardening at Meadowbrook, the Urbana Park District supplied ample supplies of manure for us to use at planting time, and again about mid-season when our plants needed a side dressing. That is not happening anymore, and lacking this resource puts a major burden on each individual gardener. We have to go out and find compost and manure that's organic, or we have to purchase commercial organic fertilizer. And that's, of course, either of those is a considerable expense to every one of the gardeners at Meadowbrook. Soon after we began gardening at Meadowbrook, we had to fence out rabbits. They quickly discovered there was good stuff down there. This was doable since a fence to keep out a rabbit is not a very big fence and was relatively affordable. For some time, we were allowed to store these fences in the corn crib during the off-season when they had to come off the plots. And that privilege was removed. Now, of course, we have to install high fences to prevent devastation of our gardens by deer. Purchasing this fencing and the posts needed to support it is really a big investment. Driving posts that are tall enough and sturdy enough to hold up a 7-foot tall fence is a big job, even if you own a post driver, which most people, of course, do not. And then devising a gate into your garden and purchasing a lock to go on that gate to keep garden thieves out is one more cost. Storing the fence during the off-season is a major burden. On our suburban lot, finding a spot to store the fence for a garden and all of the posts where it's not an eyesore for us or for the rest of our neighbors to look at is a real problem, and I simply don't know what someone who lives in an apartment does with 60 feet or 30 feet or however many feet of fencing and all of the posts that they had to put up to keep deer out of their garden. Oversight of the gardening program, particularly enforcement of the rules, seems to grow more lax every year. 2 years ago, our neighbor, our gardening neighbor to the west of us, had a 2.5-gallon container, bright orange as your sweater, that contained preen, and it sat in that garden for 2 weeks, right beside the path that comes through. How the gardening coordinator didn't notice that and get it out of there was beyond our imagination. Had this happened when the gardens first opened, Heather Young, and I know some of you may remember her, would have had a skull and crossbones posted on that garden. The preen would have been gone, and that gardener would have been thoroughly educated by what it means to garden organically. Weedy gardens that are abandoned are, in our judgment, left far too long, sowing weeding problems for all of us, because those are tight spaces and weed seeds don't stay on your plot. Now that tall fences are needed, the rule which required us to leave a space between contingent gardens doesn't make any sense. You cannot squeeze down that small space, which was intended for you to pull hoses through. Now you can't squeeze down, it just becomes a no-man's land with weeds growing in it. And the chrysanthemum weed has particularly grown up in those spaces, and every time the garden plots are worked, the rototiller pulls that chrysanthemum weed from those plots into the neighboring plots. All of these costs and aggravations, along with the loss of theft owing to folks who come by and pick things on their own, are really diminishing the value of the gardens to those of us who have found real joy in being able to go out there and garden and have produced vegetables that have been good and worthwhile and organic. You are abandoning plots, obviously, because they're not rented, and so this is a statement to us that the program is failing, or at least being diminished. And at a time when surveys across the nation show that vegetable gardening is one of the biggest hobbies in the US, it seems amazing to us that those gardens are being abandoned. Our only conclusion is that they are too costly for people to fence and not worthwhile for them to have. If you don't fence, you don't have produce. That's all there is to it. We believe, having gardened out there over these years and enjoyed being there, and of course I'm speaking from someone now outside the district, because 16 years ago we moved outside the district. And in some ways that has prevented us from speaking out, because we gladly pay the extra fee to garden there. But we can't stand by and not say anything anymore. I volunteer at the Twice as Nice thrift shop on Elm Street in Urbana. A couple years ago, a tall fellow from India came in, and with much embarrassment, he asked, "Do you guys sell any pantyhose?" And we said, "Sure we do." And we were curious what this tall fellow from India was going to do with pantyhose. He was gardening at Meadowbrook. Someone told him that he might be able to keep deer out of his plot by putting smelly soap in pantyhose and hanging them. We gave him pantyhose, but I also told him, don't waste your time. No deer is going to be put off by soap hanging in pantyhose at your garden. We believe it's time for the Park District to install a suitable wire fence around that whole organic garden, protect all the plots from the deer, and ensure that anyone who gardens out there can, number one, afford to garden because they don't have the expense of installing a huge fence, and then trying to figure out what to do with it over the winter. I think then you can again have a successful program, and we certainly hope that you will. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out, Dixie. And is there anyone else wishing to address the board? Seeing none, we can move on then to new staff introductions. I
We have none.
have none of that, okay. And the UPDAC report, we had a written set of minutes, I think, in in the packet. Are there any comments or questions on that?
Yeah, Katie did a great job. Nobody fell asleep, which is always a, yeah, you know, in the old days, people would not want to come to the meetings, or they think, meh, meh, meh. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on updeck? Okay, that brings us then to our consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda this evening are approval of the minutes from the February 5th, 2019 study session, approval of the minutes from the February 12th regular board meeting, action to accept the philanthropy report and gifts listed with gratitude, receipt of the monthly reports from the 3 departments, administration, planning and operations, and recreation, approval of the monthly paid accounts payable, and action to approve ordinance 2019-02, authorizing sale and disposal of personal property per state law. So, under our rules, it's the purview of any single commissioner to remove any of these items or all of these items from the consent agenda for separate action. Is there any commissioner desiring to do that? Hearing none, is there anyone prepared to make a motion that we approve these items in an omnibus fashion?
I move that we approve all the action items on the consent agenda and accept all the information items listed on the consent agenda in an omnibus manner.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, and under our rules of the consent agenda, there's to be no further discussion. So we should hold a roll call vote on this. So begin at the right with Meredith.
Aye.
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 And that carries unanimously. And that takes us on then to the financial reports.
Pretty.
First of all, I did my best to provide in the consent agenda a version of the paid accounts payable that was sorted by department. So if you'd like, I can continue to present that side by side. This one's by vendor, this one's by department. They total to the same amount, but it gives you a picture of not only who we paid, but kind of where it went. So I hope this is what I was saying, though. These standard reports are just really full of information, which is great. But you know, there's information that the board doesn't really need, like what the check numbers were, what exact account numbers they went to, et cetera. But I mean, as long as you're willing to overlook that and get the gist of it from it, I'll just keep sending it along. So the accounting software conversion is over, but our work is not done. So the people left, and we're glad to kind of have our schedules back, and we're still figuring out how to use the system. I've been on the phone with their support, very responsive. I've been able to get a hold of them. If they don't have somebody available to speak to me immediately, they take my phone number and they call me back within 10 minutes. I mean, it's very fast, and they're able to solve the problems, and I move forward. So it's going well. So it's not Carla from the city, but it's as close as we're gonna get with a new system. So we're happy, and we're, like I said, still learning to use it, but all of our basic functions are up and running. So as we continue to hone in on what else it can do, and I even talked to Andrea at the legislative breakfast, and she said, I'm still learning what all this can do. So I'm like, well, and they've had it for years, so I'm not alone.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
she's like, it's
wow.
just very robust, and it does things, you know, and it's like, once you're in your day-to-day work and you already have your processes running, it's hard to then step back and say, okay, what else can I get this to do, or whatever. So that's our goal in the next year, is to really kind of get our hands on what else it can do for us and what other efficiencies we can create with it. So with that, I will discuss the 3 financial reports that were included in the board packet this month. And these present the results for the month of February 2019. So again, this is the revenue and expenditure report that's replacing our old fund balance report, but it's still in a very similar format. And I made some tweaks to it this month, so it's slightly different than the one I presented last month. I like it better because the one I presented last month said net, 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 net along the side. I was like, why does it say that? And so this one doesn't say that, so I was like, oh, I like it. So I saved this for next month. I can rerun it easily with a new date. I also added some additional highlights to try to draw attention to totals and things like that.
Yeah,
So
that's
hopefully
really
that's
helpful.
useful information. And these are easy formats that I just reapply to the next report. So it's not difficult for me to do that at all. So. Okay, so we're 10 months into the fiscal year, and total revenues and transfers in for this period were $11,384,000. And that's 88% of total revenues, expected budgeted revenues. Total expenditures for this period were $10,724,000, which is about 80% of expected expenditures. And so you can see that we're at a positive $660,000 net change of revenues over expenditures after the end of this, at the end of this 10 months, which is quite a bit higher than our expected budgeted amount of minus $600,000. So we're doing pretty well. Now, of course, we still have 2 more months to pay for, so our revenues are basically done at this point, other than some earned revenues for fees and charges. But the expenditures will continue to be spent. So I expect we'll be on budget or above budget. I don't know exactly how much yet, so we're still got to get through March and April, but we're doing just fine. And you've heard me say before that a typical kind of slower month for us is like around $500,000 for expenditures for payroll and vendors. And so that's leaving plenty of room in this budget for an increase in fund balance in our operating funds at the end of year, or beating our budgeted expectations. And sum two is just the capital improvements fund. I was just talking to Andy today. This budget's going to have a lot of activity next fiscal year. So I'm excited about some of the projects that we have coming up. Total revenues for this period were $1,167,000. That includes the transfers in from the English fund to fund the pool pack, the Urbana Park District's share of the pool pack at the indoor pool. And expenditures for this period were $742,000, with a net change in revenues over expenditures at the end of this period of $425,000. And then finally, all funds district-wide, this is the first 2 pages added together. Our final ending fund balance at the end of 10 months is $8,197,000. Following that are the summary pages for our main working funds, the general fund, the recreation fund, the museum fund, and the indoor pool. The next report, if there's no questions, I'm happy to answer any. If there's none, I'll move on to the treasurer's report. This report lists all 24 funds and where the money is invested in which banks. And I did want to point out, even though I'm not presenting that supplemental cash report any longer, when we restructured the chart of accounts, I did rearrange the order of the funds to kind of put them in that order. So you can see the first 4 funds at the top are our main operating funds. So those were the ones that were in the daily operating activities section of the old supplemental report of cash. And then that's followed by our other levied funds. So we've got the IMRF, the liability, the Social Security, the special rec, and the police. And then following that are some other special use funds or special purpose funds. And then you get into the bond fund and the capital improvements type funds at the bottom. So the capital improvements fund, the land acquisition, Crystal Lake Pool renewal, and Perkins Road are all classified as capital improvements fund. So I grouped them all together in the 80s down there. So I did try to put some logic into when we restructured these funds. So I did want to point that out, that even though I'm not presenting it in that format, you can still get the gist of it just by the order that the funds are in. So at the end of February, on the last day of February, the district had $9,924,496.25 in the bank. Of that amount, $8,320,000 was invested, and we're continuing to see interest rates rise. Illinois funds went up again, and we've had a couple of CDs mature with Commerce Bank that I'm going to move into Illinois funds this month, or I'm going to work with our treasurer to move. No changes in interfund loans this period. They're still the same. And finally, disbursements for the month of February were $460,000. And with that, I present the treasurer's report.
Sorry. I move we accept the treasurer's report for audit.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any comment or questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously.
I will touch briefly on the areas of activity in the capital budgets. There was no activity in the 2019 capital budget this period. On the second page in the 2018 capital budget, we received transfer in from the English fund, a small transfer towards expenditures that were paid in the month of February. And we also received the IDOT money for the land along University Avenue that the board approved several months ago. I think that was back in November. So that check was received in the mail and booked in our books. And then in the expenditure side, we had expenditures on tributes and donations, and also on the offsetting amount for that pool pack replacement. And finally, on the Weaver Park Trailhead, there was a small expenditure there. I think on signs or something. In the 2017 capital budget, we had expenditures on the James Room, which came out of the ADA capital projects budget here. And then at the top line there with the asterisks. And we also had spending on construction crew projects, recreation small equipment, and the Crystal Lake improvements was, I think, a sediment basin project payment. Not I think, it was. And then the other portion of, and then we also had our first payment on the 2016 capital budget out of the $500,000 transfer from the general fund that we made to support improvements at Crystal Lake Park, and that was on design.
ERA,
Design work for the project. So I was really excited to see, because that to me was an indication that that project's really moving forward now. So, and now Andy and Derek have other updates on capital improvements.
Yep, I'll start within Crystal Lake Park. Derek and I had a pre-construction meeting this morning at the IDOT region headquarters. Went very well. Stark is the contractor for the project. We discussed upcoming schedule. They're planning to get started April 15th, the week of April 15th, which is right around the corner. So we'll do our due diligence and make sure we notify the public through all of our social media, website. And IDOT has a firm completion date, so I can say with pretty surety that July 12th, our path work should be completed. That includes all punch list items. Everything on the site for their construction activities has to be completed per IDOT by July 12th. So Stark felt very comfortable with that schedule. They think they have more than enough time to get everything completed in that time frame. Speaking of the CLP rehab project and ERA, we're expecting the 25% design documents by Friday. That will include the opinion of probable cost. We'll then take our time with our staff planning group, reviewing those documents to give quality feedback back to ERA. We'll then review our budget with their opinion of costs and be able to refine the scope for the final phase 2 rehab portion of the project. Water quality within Crystal Lake Park. We had a phone conference with our management company, ILM, that did the water treatment during last summer, spring, summer, and fall. This was a scheduled wrap-up type meeting, discuss how we think things went, also potential plans for this coming season. So we'll be expecting a couple different options with some pricing proposals from that group on what we can do to help reduce our nutrient load and hopefully reduce the nuisance plants that we have growing on the lake in the summer. Derek, Kara, and I will actually be attending an Illinois Lake Management Conference Thursday and Friday, which is perfect timing. So we'll be able to attend numerous sessions on basically the issues we're dealing with in Crystal Lake Park and the sediment, and how other agencies around the state and the surrounding area are dealing with that. And then we'll be able to review our proposals from ILM and have a good plan moving forward on treatment of the lake for this summer. Phillips Playground, everything is now removed from the site. Keith has been doing site prep and staking out locations for the support beams. Everything's looking good on schedule. As a reminder, we're planning on having that installed by the first week of June. And James' room is not yet fully in our possession, but cabinets are all in, countertops are all in, appliances are all in. The room looks phenomenal. We'll have a walkthrough tomorrow with the architect and contractor. There's a couple things that we've asked to get revised, widening an opening for the refrigerators, and we want a larger sink. So a couple things still need to get worked out and finished, but I think in the next week or so we should be taking possession of our kitchen again. Last thing I wanted to mention was our outdoor pool improvements project. May have been a while since I've discussed this, but the contractor has started last week. This is for the replacement of the exterior lockers, adding the interior pocket lockers, and then the changing rooms in the men's and women's locker room. So they started, like I said, middle of last week. They have almost all the lockers installed at this point. They were delivered before they were ready to begin. So that was something I was worried about, was the lead time for lockers. They'll work on framing the walls and the CMU work. We need some favorable weather. We need consistent 50-degree days for the flooring and paint to happen. So that'll be one of the last things in all likelihood to be finished, as well as the site furnishings, the signs, the partitions and doors and things like that. So schedule is to have final completion by the second week of April, which leaves us plenty of time for the opening of the pool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I had one quick update. We're still working through some challenges with the pool pack unit at the Indoor Aquatic Center. I would say it's not entirely without surprise, because this is now our third one, and we've had challenges every time. It's interesting because every time we get to this point, we think this is it. We're finally, this is going to be it.
On the positive side.
And then we get another email.
Right. On Wednesday, tomorrow, we're going to receive an entire new furnace burning unit that's getting replaced, and Reliable has demanded of Pool Pack that they extend the warranty functional
Oh, good.
day that new assembly goes in. So
Good.
there's been a variety of different pressure switches replaced and settings adjusted. We've had Pool Pack technicians on site a few times. What's happened all winter long is that Joseph's been closely monitoring the Pool Pack with the app that we feel is a real blessing. But when he sees it drop, he knows what's happened. He contacts the head project manager for Reliable by text, and within an hour they send out a technician to help to reset the unit. So
That's crazy.
to their credit, they've been very responsible. They're very frustrated. We're very frustrated. But we're thinking
Wow.
this may be it. We're hopeful.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for those reports, and move now to the Executive Director's report.
Sure. A number of things. First thing I wanted to do is highlight the special rec event Saturday, the Theater 101. Want to pass around the ticket.
Yeah.
I was really pleased I went. They've really just done a phenomenal job. You may recall the last theater they did was more stage production, and this time they went and found a local filmmaker, Brian Hagee. I don't know if any of you know him. He's a local professional filmmaker, but he donated his time and effort. And they basically made this film, The Mystery at the Hayes Center. Our own Anita Stein of Urbana was the assistant director, and she wrote the screenplay. So it was very creative, and it was very well done. They had essentially a premiere, so they had 2 red carpets and food and everything. It was very full room. We had about 55 people, and it's I'll send you the link, or it's on YouTube now, so
Yeah.
you're able to view it. But it's
great.
very well done. And if you really kind of watch it, you'll kind of see how the writing structure and the character development, and it's a very short film, but it's got all the pieces, so it's very well done. So I think they're going to alternate between stage and filming, assuming we get volunteers to help. But I just wanted to mention it, super creative, and I bet a lot of special rec groups aren't able to do that high level, collaborative work in the community. Obviously, we're fortunate we have a lot of talented people here, but it just couldn't have been a better event. Everybody came out. It was a really good time. So hats off to the special rec staff. Hope you all had a good time at the legislative conference. Staff was pleased at the turnout. We had a lot of our smaller communities. That's important to us because, we still collaborate and work with everybody in the area, whether they're calling us or we're following up with them. So very pleased. Next year we'll likely be at the Virginia Theater, and Champaign Park District will host. The state planning and research grant for the extended Kickapoo Rail Trail is going to kick off. We have our meeting April 4th. The UPD will be the lead agency. I think RPC is going to run the project. They'll approve, all the expenditures and handle the grant part, but we'll be the lead agency. I know the city of Urbana has, they have some staffing level of concerns, and so we've offered to serve that role. But again, it'll be our partnership, and we'll all be meeting for the kickoff, and then we'll start that process. So we're very excited.
Remind us what this is.
That's really taken analysis from where the Kickapoo Rail Trail, thank you, stops out by Weaver Park, where naturally the Forest Preserve's property ended. From that point all the way up to Lincoln Avenue, we'll be taking a deeper look and analysis of what would it take to extend that, what are the known facts, right-of-ways, conditions, current arrangements. So it's a really good chance for us to do a lot of analysis. And just a reminder, we appreciate Carl's offer to be our local match, so they'll be serving in that role for that. So we're excited about that. We'll probably have more information after our kickoff, but just to let you know, that's moving ahead. There was a delay too with the money getting to RPC, so we had a couple of months of delay of funding issues through the state, but we're ready to go. So we're excited.
What's your estimated time for completing that?
They have a whole schedule put together. It'll be a 9-10 month study, so it'll be
less than a year.
Right. And then if there's other things we need to do or follow up, there could be delays too. I'm always reluctant when we start working with rail companies if we're waiting on information or trying to get connections, but I think we should stay on track. Just an update, I think I've mentioned before, Corky and I had a meeting with a campus person that's going to be involved with the City of Urbana's new neighborhood study process they're kind of doing a pilot study. I don't want to say a whole lot because there is some of the other departments at the city will be involved. But for our part, we were interviewed. There's going to be a class that's going to be working on this. They're going to be putting a survey tool together. It'll go out to the portion of Crystal Lake Park neighborhood that'll be involved. We've got a lot of exciting ideas, so we think it'll be a springboard. But the idea is, can we create a model that as we go into neighborhoods that need improvements, is there a process that we can put together? What information do we need? How do we begin talking with neighbors? What can we do as a collaborative group here in Urbana between the city and the Park District and others, university, to try to provide this information? So we're real excited. Obviously, once we have results back and information, we can share that. I think I mentioned in my report about Leal Park. Obviously, we have a couple of things happening on the east and west sides. I'll be talking with the proposed developers on the west side later this week. I think we touched on minimum wage at the event yesterday, but more importantly, I think our staff leadership team and the finance study group want to start taking on that, taking a look at how that'll start to weave into our operating budgets as we go through the next few years. Blair Park, I think we presented at our study session, those that saw the plans, but basically we have a number of park improvements at Blair Park, and that park playground is moving up in the schedule. So we'd like to get going on that. Really excited. We have a number of path connections, play options, things we could do with the shelter and landscape elements in the park that could certainly be improved. Did want to mention a great program that the Park District's customer service team is doing. It's interesting what the team put together is basically they've matched us with another staff. And the idea is that there's newer staff and long-term staff, and the idea is you get matched up with the person you're supposed to meet. It's not really a mentoring type program, but it's a get to know and sort of build your resource. And so I know I've met with my person. We had a fantastic time. It was somebody, you know them because they work here, but you really get to know them if you spend a little time with them. So I think everybody's having that experience. And then at our fall retreat, we'll have a reporting, and they have some activities planned. So it's a really clever, neat idea. They're doing a great job, trying to do some new things with staff. I think Andy covered the ITEP program, and I also sent information about the Roots Walk event being canceled. There was some competing interest at the fairgrounds, so I just wanted to mention that. Lastly, wrapping up, I think it was March 2nd, the Read Across America happened at Lincoln Square, hugely successful, lots and lots of people out. We get really excited when kids and families get to come out and they've got books in their hands and they're ready to read, and there were hundreds of people there. And Celeste Choate at the library told me when she stopped by for her shift, she was observing a group of storytellers working with really young kids, and it just brought tears to her eyes that the kids were just enwrapped, with the story and hanging on every word, and there were no digital devices that were really a part of that. Lastly, just shout out to our Nature Center staff and rec staff. They're hosting the Bio Blitz. You've probably read it in previous reports, but for the 40th anniversary. The reason I wanted to mention it's an incredible amount of work. We did it once, and it might have been one of those events you might have been able to get a pass and say, oh, we did that once, and that was a huge amount of work, but they're very enthusiastic and they're ready to take a fresh look at it. So we're excited about that. And I can answer any questions if you have any about other things.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Moving on to the President's report. Upcoming meetings, our next study session is April 2nd. And then on April 9th, we'll have our regular meeting, and annual things that are likely to be dealt with there are authorizing wage, salary, and merit actions for the coming fiscal year, accepting preliminary budget for the coming fiscal year, and revising the current year capital projects budget as we may need, and also approve adjustments to the current fiscal year's budget. We do this on an annual basis, rejigger that a little bit, and approve a resolution designated committed ending fund balances. So that's also something we do annually in April. Other than that, I don't have anything particular to report. And as for the liaison reports, the Finance Study Group has not met. I believe we're scheduled to meet next on the 5th of April.
Mm-hmm.
The Policy Study Group, is there anything to report there?
We have not met.
Okay. And Urbana Parks Foundation representative. So Roger, you're probably, this is the exciting week for you.
Yeah, it's been a busy week. Just a reminder, you know about the foundation dinner coming up on Thursday evening. Just a reminder too of the Barn Bash, which is a major funder that's going to be on the 17th, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you can get tickets now. So it's kind of an odd thing, because if it doesn't rain, there's unlimited space. If it does, there's room for about 250 people in the barn. So get your tickets. So the boat drunks will be there. So
that's the 17th of May, is that right?
yes,
Correct.
I'm sorry.
It's a
May
Friday
17th,
night.
Yeah.
And the update planning and study group.
No, we have not met.
Okay.
Moving around.
Moving on, and there was no old business removed from the consent agenda, so we're ready for new business. And fiscal year 2020 aquatics budget update.
Great. Corky and Leslie here tonight to talk about a proposal involving a new program, a new staffing option at the Park District. I think what you'll find is they've put a lot of thought. We've been working on this for a number of years. Basically, once we acquired 2 pools, our immediate plan was to, really maximize our year-round aquatics. I think it's safe to say the Urbana Park District, in partnership with the Urbana School District at the indoor, have led a really amazing aquatic program in Urbana. I think there's opportunities to expand it And so staff's here tonight. They'd like to walk you through a proposal and answer any questions you might have and get some feedback. So with that, we'll turn it over to you all.
Yeah, before I turn it over to Leslie, I want to just reiterate, we talked, you've heard me say several times, we've lost some valuable part-time staff over the years that had lots of years of experience. We were having challenges since they left trying to manage both facilities, and I'd had discussions with you guys about we have a need for another full-time position to help manage the 150 some plus aquatic staff and the operations of both facilities. Kind of backtracking a little bit, we were trying to look for a solution for that. And so as we were doing that, about 8 months ago, I had a coach talk to me about a year-round swimming program. And then, me and Leslie's first priority is how do we get this coordinator position that we really need to manage the day-to-day. We can't even think about adding anything new. So then I challenged Leslie with looking at our budgets and what we can add if we do add a year-round program, and she's here to talk to you about it tonight.
Yep. So like Corky said, we did have a lot of part-time staff that left onto full-time careers. We helped them, gain all of that experience. That was about 30 years of experience combined for those part-time staff. So it was like we were starting from ground zero. There's been different challenges that have come with that, the different mentalities that have come up and all of that. So it's really something that we, like Corky said, he challenged me to look into these things. Now, with an aquatics program coordinator, we really want them to start looking at the swim lesson program and also some other new activities that will be brought to the table as well. The swim pro that he was talking about, coaching, that's the year-round swim team that can be at our facility. The Nadiator swim team went from 180 to 220 participants in one season. Only a few of those swimmers swim year-round currently. So we have a huge base that we're able to pull from. Some of the other programs that we're hoping to implement are mermaid splash parties, holiday camps, and then bringing back aquatics camp. I think we all know what the need is for aquatics or for camps in general in the summertime. This would bring about 32 more kids to camps per week. We would only be doing it for 7 weeks up until when the indoor aquatic center closes for their annual cleaning. But it would give those kids another chance to have, more kids in our camps and in our facilities. We also want to do things like stroke clinics. That's where the swim pro comes in again. They'll be able to do the basic things that are like more in depth with the actual strokes than our swim lesson program can. A lot of the people that do these clinics already, they know what to expect. They know what their challenges are. It's a different audience than what the swim lesson program has. We also want to enhance our Nadiator swim team. We want to be able to bring more special events. We want to be able to promote our movies more. And that's what a lot of these different aspects of these positions are. Anything else that you'd like me to?
Well, I'd also like to point on one thing is that I think's most important that this is going to allow us to do, and from a management perspective as a whole, we are going to have full-time staff Monday through Sunday at the facilities, sometime scheduled time throughout each day. We mentioned minimum wage. I think this will have a huge impact on how we can manage in less than hours of part-time staff that are going to be there, because we now will have some full-time staff presence. There's lots of times at the outdoor pool especially, we'll have a couple shift managers where now we may not need that because we're going to have a full-time staff person there. Not to mention a full-timer is going to be more Okay, here's our scenario at our facility as far as how many people are visiting and how many staff we really need. Our part-timers do a great job, and we've been able to count on them to make sure things are safe. But anytime you have a part-time presence versus a full-time presence, you're going to see a difference of how many staff may really be needed. And as we look to work with our part-time budget numbers, I think this will have a huge impact on that as well. Not to mention these changes that we are proposing here works within the same taxing dollar as what we had last year. And not so much on the budget sheet that you've seen here. There's a little bit of difference in the number from last year to this year. But in the Crystal Lake one, it adjusts. So it's overall for aquatics, it's the same tax dollar. If we were going to just have another coordinator, and if we didn't add any new programs that expand the aquatics experience at the Park District, we would have needed to come up with $27,000 on top of what we spent last year. So we think this is going to be a scenario that, one, is going to enhance aquatics in Urbana, but also be able to do it in the same amount of dollars support. We feel we've got there's a person in mind for the swim pro that is well known, that is just exactly what you need to establish a new program. So we're confident that it'll go just as we're thinking it will go.
And for the safety aspect of it, it's going to free up some of our time as well to be able to run more audits ourselves and do extra things to just enhance that quality that we already have, and even communicate it more to our patrons and to the people that are coming to our facilities and the public.
So you've talked a lot about year-round swimming for youth, but does this extend to adults? I was just looking at, I thought we had a master swim club in town, but we don't.
They have a master swim club. We do a swim meet for them every year, actually, in October. Currently, we have a swimming program that's from infancy all the way up to adults. We have adult swim lessons, and it goes up through intermediate adults, so beginners and then intermediate. The master's team is through the YMCA.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that is an intangible that you can't really put a number or anything on is the fact that when you're looking for employees, when you're looking for, if someone's new to town and wants to know where do you go for aquatics, this type of program will help us go from infancy through recreationally through competitive swim, which then in the future we're hoping helps us have more staff that want to work for us in the future. It's always a challenge. The more staff we have, again, the less overtime that we're paying lifeguards, because we have no option but to pay overtime if we don't have the staff to be there. So that, again, all adds up in those part-time wages that we're paying in the future. So.
And one thing I'm going to really try to do also is get out there more to recruit staff members. Right now, my efforts really go into training those staff members that we have and that we're bringing in. But if with this, I'm able to actually go out and try to pull some more people in and talk to different people.
One last point, one thing that you won't see in the budgets is it's standard for these competitive swimmers to not only pay their dues and fees to be a part of it. It's not a cheap activity, but it's like a travel program. But the other requirement is they are accustomed to paying memberships, so for their family. So the family will purchase an aquatics and indoor pool membership, and we did not adjust the budget for those numbers. So
Oh, good.
we're going in with not knowing what that will be, but we do think it'll have an impact on total visitation for our indoor pool as well. So with that, that's all I have to say for this evening on it, unless there's any questions.
What is the current participant rate for those that are receiving swim lessons now?
So it fluctuates through the year. Right now, our Saturday lessons that just started, we're pretty much packed at like 12 kids per class. So that's about, I want to say we have about 30 kids signed up. No, more like 40 kids signed up per hour, 2 hours of Saturday lessons. And then we also have our Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday lessons that are approximately the same.
In terms of number.
A number of kids, yes. And then we have private lessons on top of that.
This would also help us open dialogue again about school.
Yes. Well, I wanted to say
Actually,
that.
Meredith, in the
we're
back
on it.
of my mind,
Each have our hobby courses, and that's
Yep.
Meredith's and mine.
if this goes to, if this is actually comes to fruition as well as we think it could, it could be an opportunity where we could afford the lessons ourselves.
Yep.
So
Right.
that's in my mind
Right.
because
We talked about
we talk
that.
about it all the time.
Yeah. The idea of if we couldn't jump back to doing that, could this be a bridge and help lead it? It certainly would potentially be positive for the revenue, but
Right, it would
it's another way to gain access and get people in that building and, so.
Well, and provides good infrastructure in terms of
Exactly.
personnel and
Yes.
expertise in
Exactly.
terms of delivering swimming lessons to
Right.
Right.
through a school
Right.
type of program.
Urbana's
Yeah,
king of aquatics.
I would, since you mentioned expertise, I'd like to mention the fact too that typically a swim pro, they run a swim team and that's it. We are asking more of that while we establish a larger swim team. Maybe it has to change a little bit down the road, but they are also going to be working with the coordinator, showing them techniques, but they're also going to be in the beginning working with all of our swim instructors so that there's a consistency from infancy all the way through. So
Another factor too, our Nadiators numbers have just exploded.
Yes.
There's so many kids involved. I know they do additional training and but there's more of those kids that could be potentially involved in a year-round program.
Yep.
So I think,
And we have a Nadiator conditioning program as well, which kind of went during the school year. It's almost like a year-round swim team, but without the competitive aspect of it. It's more of the workouts. We're anticipating most of them go over to the year-round competitive swim team. So
Do we have a sense of why there was such an explosion in numbers?
for Nadiators, because we're awesome.
yeah. And pools,
Oh, we've been awesome. I
Right.
think Derek knows of awesomeness.
I think
well, the
honestly,
facility had a lot to
Yeah,
do with
it's-
it. It's grown since the facilities,
Very
the
Yeah.
new
attractive place to be.
and then we've had a consistent coach as well for the past 4 years, and that's really helped.
Right.
Yep, yep.
And then we've had another coach come back, actually, that has helped as well. And she actually coaches the high school swim team, boys swim team.
They know
So,
Michelle Zimmerman.
yeah, there's a lot of crossover, which has definitely helped.
Right, right.
I think our outdoor facility with the full-scale competitive pool was definitely another design move to be able to capture that. Many of the pools we looked at had 6 lanes, or some even have 3 lanes, just to have a lap lane.
Yep.
Obviously, you have a competitive setup that sets you up for opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see them, and when I'm out there for water aerobics, I mean, the deck's full.
Yes.
There's a lot of kids out there.
And we actually have evening practices as well, so you're only seeing.
Well, yeah, because I figured, I'm thinking, I didn't see all that many, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, point out the obvious, I think, certainly a question might be, we had one conversation where we're concerned about labor cost, and obviously over here, we're suggesting we, address adding to that. I think the idea is, one, there's revenue sources to help cover, but more importantly, we still have to be a park district. We still have to do exciting things and offer things that appeal to our residents and grow and take advantage of our opportunities that we do have. And so I suppose we could again, be very concerned about that and move backwards as a way to preserve, or we think this is a case where we need to move forward on that. Certainly, we're all concerned. How do we do everything ultimately at some point? That's why we're suggesting we study and get a handle on it now, start getting things, figured out. What are the budgets? What are the costs? But this proposal is something, that I think we should give a strong consideration and not necessarily retreat in concern.
I have been approached by a couple people involved with Nadiators, interested in more of a year-round program, but something, as I understood it, well short of a travel competitive kind of situation. Is that being factored into these plans, and are the various Nadiator parents and participants well aware of these plans at this point?
I can tell you, I've talked with 4 or 5 Urbana residents that don't necessarily know on the Nadiator discussion per se, but I do know that they're definitely saying we need a year-round program in Urbana. The option can be, if they don't want to be in the competitive program, there will be an option for them to swim.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah, the swim meets is like an extra fee pretty much. So they'll be paying like the monthly fee to be able to come to the practices and be on the team. So they don't have to compete in that aspect. And then we'll also have our swim lessons up to level 6, which ultimately is competitive swimming at that level.
And again, are the Nadiator folks cognizant of where these plans are going at this point?
Not until we share them with you guys.
Yeah,
Yep.
well,
Didn't want to
fair.
get it too far out there.
Yeah.
Can you guys touch on the scholarship aspect? Because that might be a question people might have to you. What if you can't afford this? What options are out there?
Well, it's just like any of our other programs. There'll be scholarship options with the percentages that we use. I will say, for one, our memberships are quite a bit cheaper than the
Some of our
competitors in the area. And so I think there's probably some people that may make it more affordable for them. But yeah, we'll have scholarship options just like we do for our other programs.
Right. The other point I want to make too is this is a program right in Urbana. There are other programs, but you have to travel or commute, to get to the locations. And so when staff get asked, can Urbana get a program going, we have to take that serious. It's, well, they have it over there or here, but they're asking for it to be in our community. And so I think the timing is ripe for that.
I think the last thing, I could talk about this for a while because we've been studying it for a while, but I will tell you when I was approached about 8 months ago, way back when, I was also kind of in charge of the Aqua Chiefs. It was when Urbana was monitoring it. So I know the ins and outs of that, but I also asked Katie for some budget numbers from a couple years ago, and the numbers we are using, while Leslie has done some other work as well, but the numbers match up with what we've done in the past with it. So another reason why I feel pretty comfortable that this will go well and we will be the leaders in aquatics. I mean, that's what we strive to be. And, the indoor and outdoor pool combination really sets us up to be able to do that. And this is what I think is, so besides the 3rd grade lessons, I think is the last piece we need to become that.
Mm-hmm. So I think this evening was more background information, sharing, get any feedback or answer any questions, assuming we would be moving forward. What's our timing?
Yeah,
just
with
in
the
general?
caveat, if everybody's comfortable with this, we do need to get it moving because we've got to get things, we've got to get the program advertised, we've got to get people hired, we've got to get aquatics camp scheduled and are ready for a brochure that goes to the print tomorrow.
No rush.
No
It's
pressure.
fine.
So it will become public fairly quickly, so it is right now, but anyhow. We do need to move on it sooner rather than later if this is something so that we're ready. The sign-up season for year-round swimming is May 1st, so we need to make sure there's a,
Yeah, there will be two different seasons too. We didn't explain that. There will be a summer season, and then there will be the school year season. More people swim in the school year season, but there are still a lot that swim in the summer season.
Now, will you guys use this, I guess, kind of as a pilot for other programs that you have that are in competition with tribal teams?
I think as we look at how we're going to do things in the future for minimum wage and all those kinds of things and how we structure the district, I think if we can find programs like that, that's going to help us out a lot.
Right, right.
I just noticed there was a suggested motion in the annotated
thanks.
agenda, but we don't actually need to move on the item because it'll be a part of the FY20 budget approval process. So it's just, this was more preliminary to get your support of a fairly major change that we're making, so that we can have the full knowledge of the board going into that budgeting process without it being a surprise later, so.
And of course, we'll continue to monitor, evaluate, get feedback, you know, as we do in every program area as we go.
So I didn't really answer your question. I guess the answer is I'm not sure yet, but we'll continue to look at things and see how we can enhance any area, all areas that we have. So.
I think that's all we had, unless there's other questions on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks,
And,
Leslie.
sounds like exciting things coming. Moving on to an action item to approve agreement for purchase of Main Street properties.
In November of 2018, the board authorized purchase of 103 Grossbach. And that was the last property on Grossbach Avenue, which is a road that comes down into Victory Park. We've purchased others in the past. At the time, we were aware that that same seller owned two properties to the north on Main Street, and we're curious if this might spawn a conversation about their possible sell to us, and in fact it did. Staff met with the owner in January, and she was willing to sell the properties at a slight discount if we purchased both of them together in September, allowing time for her current tenants to run through the course of their lease. And so at the time, the board was interested in proceeding with that offer. So the discounted price for each property is $79,000 and $73,000. They appraised for $80,000 and $74,000 respectively. We've since worked with Attorney Matt Deering to develop an agreement, a contract for the purchase of those properties, and that's before you tonight. So staff would recommend that if the board is still interested, we move forward with approving that contract.
I think Derek mentioned in the memo, but the funding for the purchase of the properties, the $500 earnest money will be paid out of the land acquisition fund this fiscal year. And then the balance of the purchase price will be funded with a transfer from the general fund to the land acquisition fund next fiscal year when we purchase the properties in September. And then we also are budgeting the demolition costs out of the land acquisition fund that's being funded from general fund transfer as well. So that'll all be built into the FY20 budget. And when we get to that process, I can draw your attention to those figures.
I should also mention that for folks viewing at home, the acquisition of these two properties will really open up the north side of Victory Park
Yeah,
off of Main Street in a way that
Yes, it will.
is somewhat shielded today. So we think it'll add a lot to the park, and we're excited to begin working with neighbors on kind of re-envisioning maybe a mini master plan update, and talking with our Citizen Advisory Committee, folks that represent the HUNA, the Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association, expressed interest in working with staff on doing that.
Good.
Yes.
And is there a guesstimate for the demolition costs for the two properties at this point?
Yeah, properties recently have been averaging about $15,000 to $20,000 a piece to demo. A lot of it depends upon asbestos. We ran into a fair amount with the property out on Binker Grove, but had a lower asbestos quantity when we looked at the property on Franklin.
And any likely price break for a twofer?
A little bit, yeah. We talked with the demo contractor that seems to have won a lot of our recent bids. Were really kind of, well, this will be a bid project because of the two properties, and he thought there would be some savings in terms of doing two at once, certainly.
I move to approve the contract to purchase real property identified as parcel identification number PIN 92-21-16-104-004 and 92-21-16-104-005, commonly known as 907 and 909 East Main Street in Urbana, for $79,000 and $73,000 each, and to authorize Executive Director Timothy Bartlett or his designee to sign the closing documents on behalf of the Urbana Park District.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions?
Keep me alive here.
Hearing none, we should hold a roll call vote on that. We'll start at the left here.
Aye.
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 Okay. So we're buying some houses.
Great.
We're buying some ground that's got
There's some
houses
ground
on
that's house, yes, indeed.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
well, I think it's a pretty exciting prospect,
It is,
actually.
it's
gonna
break-
be huge. It's
Breaking
gonna be huge.
more through
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
Main Street there.
Right.
There was no action for new business removed from the consent agenda, so we're on to comments from commissioners.
I just wanted to comment on our public comment, and I was as a former gardener there, and also the garden supervisor years ago. I think she brought up some really valid points and concerns, and I really appreciate that she presented a simple solution that I don't think is unreasonable, and I don't know what staff have been considering, but I could conceive of something that's very longer term, a little bit more beautiful than just a fence, or, a general fence. But I do think that it's a challenge, and I'm I have considered it myself because I have a wonderful sugar maple that provides so much shade, and I've tried in every corner of sunlight. It doesn't work, but it is all of what she has suggested is what prevents even me from the labor of the fencing and all of that, of having a garden plot at
Right.
Meadowbrook.
It's something we've discussed for many years. I think this wasn't the first time we've had these requests. I think they're perennial, sort of in the natural areas of the rec group that oversees the gardens. I think it's challenging with deer and rabbits as far as community gardening. I guess I would go as far as saying that's probably part of our experience in this part. We have talked about fencing the organic gardens. I think some current concerns are, how high would the fencing have to be to keep deer out? If a deer got in and went nuts and tore everything up, and not necessarily everybody shares the same opinions in the garden community, and so there are people that have different opinions. So to assume there's one viewpoint, that would cover all. I would recommend we take it back to Natural Areas Committee and the rec staff and continue to work on that. Not saying we couldn't end up ultimately with a, enclosure and see how that works. But I think we really want to think about that, and all the other aspects. As far as management issues, weeds and unkept gardens are, annual issues. We do our best to try to, inform people if they're not doing organic things. Certainly that's part of the arrangement there. But those are all things we can reinforce and talk with staff and make sure training, covers. But I think those essential issues of, predators and how do we handle deer, rabbits, I think we're all probably workable. If it was a issue of storing fences, could we come up with a shed or, some sort of arrangement? Those are possible things. We used to store things in the corn crib, but obviously with the Herb Society there doing their work, they have some storage needs, and those are, again, outdoor ongoing issues. Certainly we could build storage if we needed it out there. And then lastly, the sort of the visual quality at Meadowbrook. You know, I think there's some concern of a steel enclosure as being the first thing you see when you arrive there. But again, we would recommend we take this down, break down each of those issues, see what kind of solutions we can come up with.
I think
I
one-
might, go ahead.
one of the things that she didn't mention, or she didn't emphasize a great deal, was the amount of theft that goes on from people's gardens.
Sure.
And I'm not sure that it wasn't Dixie's garden that, you know, they waited all year to harvest all the squash. They came back one morning and every single one was
Yeah.
gone. And that's a really, I mean, that's a really hard
Oh,
thing
yeah.
to deal with.
For sure.
And, you know, you can hunt the deer,
Right.
but you can't hunt the
I think, you know,
folks.
since I've worked here, we've talked about it almost every year too. Some years are worse or better, but how do you really guarantee that nobody will have theft? I think that's a real challenge for us. And it's unfortunately a few, you know, inconsiderate folks. And like one year I know children were involved to it. So it wasn't even adults. They were just, you know, probably goofing around. It's a real issue though. As a gardener myself, I understand.
Yeah, it'd make you mad and.
Of course,
Tough.
absolutely. I know at least so far, our discussions have been, what do you expect or what would be likely happen in a community garden, you know, program? Certainly some theft or predation, either by animals or people, should be reasonable, but we understand the concern. You know, things, could we install cameras, things like that to, you know, try to literally catch and prosecute somebody. We probably have other areas in the district that might warrant that kind of a need, you know, at a higher priority. But again, we'd be happy to discuss it, see what we could put in place, you know, posting new rules, things like that. You know, if we need police patrols in the park, we could certainly do that, although, again, we have other places that we'd probably want to think about. What I'd be interested in is, you know, in our other community locations at like Parkland and Champaign Park District and Clark Lindsay, what sort of experiences do they have? So we'd be happy to, it'd be good information.
Tim, I also mentioned, you know, on the manure issue,
Yeah.
we were receiving reports about 2 years ago from gardeners. They felt like they were having declining fertility. And so we had a
Right.
group come in that specializes in examining soil and test the soil. And what they found was that we had extremely high levels of potassium and phosphorus, but nitrogen was our limiting nutrient. And when they heard that we were giving gardeners fresh horse manure to apply, they said you should
that'd do
stop
it.
that right away.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we pulled back on that. We did send information out to the gardeners about that. We continue to look at the fencing. Anytime I go to a park and I see community gardens, I'm looking to see how they're doing theirs.
Right.
I've seen 2 examples recently where they have them, large fencing, and some of
Yep.
them are a little bit more, you know, bucolic and kind of, they're not, it's not the chain link. However, there's still people that put fences inside the fence. And when I talk to the gardeners, they say the deer are still getting in.
Okay.
Or somebody leaves the gate
Right,
open.
right. So,
And what we've seen at our gardens is because of the theft, lots of individual locks on all the gardens, and that's something that I think we need to address. You know, we've talked about, you know, is there sort of a friends group from the gardeners that we might bring together and talk
Yes.
as well, and that's something
Right.
else we could consider. But it's a great program, and we want to do what we can to keep it going. We are seeing a decline in like the community gardens at Victory Park. Those are barely getting used right now, and so I was curious, and I do want to do more research and see where this is going nationally, if there's any sort of a trend. But we certainly think we've got a great program, and we want to do everything we can to support
Right.
it.
did want to
Also
mention,
speaks to more sort of potentially outreach and education
Yeah, that's what I was-
in horticulture space of
Right,
gardening
right.
and potentially,
Right.
you know, maybe that's part of it.
Absolutely.
well, we've talked about expanding our horticultural, you know, skills, and that may be a opportunity, you know, right there. Something I want to mention, throughout the years, I know we used to use sheep manure, and that was linked to the person at the university that could get it for us. And so when, I know at one point that person left, so we had that year was a disc. So we've had a number of sort of supply chain issues that get to us. And lastly, Derek's point about the nutrient buildup and where we are today. But again, what we recommend, I think we all agree, let's take all these, do some research, compare what other gardens are doing, see where we stand, and if we need to make some changes or additions, then we just need to do that.
I do think it would be helpful to involve some of the gardeners in
Yeah,
that process.
I agree. Because, you know, from what I've heard, at least from Corky's staff, is, well, not every gardener has the same opinion. And so
Yep.
trying to get a sense of what people's needs, expectations, and, experiences have been would be helpful. I think as a activity, gardening is, very popular. There's a number of community sites. But Derek's right. We're seeing a decline at Victory, and apparently numbers at Meadowbrook have dropped. I wasn't aware.
I think majorly, but a little bit.
Right. And I'd like to, if we looked at a 10 or 20-year history, what's sort of been our up and down. So we'd be happy to come back and provide updates.
Any other commissioner comments?
Yes. I liked Keith's report on the playground, particularly when he talked about all the recycling. I thought that was really good to know. What's happening with the Plainfield tour?
I think we have a new date.
Yep,
We
I'm
just
gonna
nailed
send
it
it out
today.
tonight.
Yep.
Oh,
So
Yep.
it's the 5th of, is that right?
April 5th.
Yeah, April
Yeah.
5th.
Friday.
And we'll leave right after the Finance Committee meeting.
Okay.
So plans to arrive here at 11:15, on the road by 11:30. We'll get orders for lunch beforehand, and folks can dine on the way up. So we should be back home by 6 o'clock is the current plan.
that sounds good.
Great.
I just saw it tonight. I don't know if it's out. A nice short video on the Foundation Splash Party.
Oh,
I don't know.
fantastic.
Yes.
Is it out? Is it out for public? Is it out anywhere
I don't
on?
know if it's out or not. She announced yesterday,
Huh,
Natalie
Natalie
did,
did.
that
Yeah.
it was still in production. So
Okay, well, I saw it on Fred's phone before I came.
Soon
So
it
it
might
is-
be I know there's videos planned at the dinner. I didn't know if they're out, on the website or.
Yeah, I don't know where
whatnot
this
yet.
is, but it's really, it's a nice short
Yeah, she
nice
said
short
we should-
video.
yeah.
The production qualities are good, and there's an
Great.
interview with the parent talking. So it's,
Fantastic.
yeah,
It's a good
yeah,
event.
yeah.
I'll make sure Mark gets it and sends it out on our
Great, that'd be
social media.
terrific. And I gather the News Gazette is coming to the dinner Thursday, so
That's all good.
you know,
Good to
need
hear.
to puff ourselves up, polish ourselves up a bit, put on our gleamy teeth.
And any other comments? Hearing none, I think we've exhausted our agenda, and I will declare us adjourned.